وياكم دكتورة لميس orthodontist at the POP department College of Dentistry University of Babylon. I am your lecturer in orthodontic department. Today I will give you the lecture 3 in orthodontic material. In the previous lecture, my colleague Dr. Isam explained for you the introduction about the orthodontic, what we meaning by the orthodontic, the aims, the normal occlusion, the key of normal occlusion, and etc. information about it. And in second lecture also, he explained for you the terminology and the important terminology about the overjet, overbite, crossbite. Today, we will discuss with you important and interest subject. It's about the orthodontic tooth movement. What I meaning by orthodontic tooth movement and how it is occur, what are the type of it will discuss later. Firstly, before I explain for you or give you a definition about what I meaning by orthodontic tooth movement, I will give you a simple explanation in order to give you a simple basic concept to understand what I meaning by orthodontic tooth movement. قبل ما أبلش لكم شنو معنات الorthodontic tooth movement راح أعطيكم فد مثال بسيط حتى نعتمد عليه إنه من خلاله راح نعرف شنو أنا أقصد وشون تصير الtooth movement. Imagine yourself that you go in a picnic in your car and suddenly your car have been stopped at the road suddenly. The first action you will do for it is to try to push your car in order to make it move forward. Here, if your force enough to make the car response for you and move, the car will be response for your force and it will be moved forward. Otherwise, you will need for additional person to help you in order to give additional pushing force to make the car response and move forward. So at this point, if the summation of these pushing force enough to make the car move, the car will be response to this force and change its position and move forward, and you will go to continue your picnic day. So depending on this simple idea, we will explain what we meaning by orthodontic tooth movement. The orthodontic tooth movement can be defined simply as a biological response for the tooth and its surrounding structure. I mean the tooth and the alveolar bone, periodontal ligaments, fiber, and etc. And what there is a mechanical and chemical mediator present in it. To what response? To the force that will be applied to the tooth. How this response will be appear for us? شلون راح يطلع هذا الريسبونس؟ يعني مثل ما الكار هسه احنا عندنا سلطنا عليها شخص اجى وسلط عليها قوة ما تحركت بالبداية، ليش؟ لأن القوة كانت غير كافية على مود تقدر تحرك لنا السيارة من مكانها. بالنسبة للتوث نفس الشيء. التوث همينه مو أي فورس أجي أني أسلطه على التوث راح يتحرك السن من مكانه، لا، ممكن أحتاج إلى قوة معينة لازم تكون قادرة على شنو؟ induce a response in the tooth and its surrounding structure. إلا تكون هاي القوة قادرة على إحداث تغيير وكيميكال ميدياتر تدفع لي بالسبورتنج ستراكشر مالت الأسنان، يلا ذاك الوقت راح يصير عندي tooth movement. فايش راح يصير عندي بالبداية؟ Firstly, this is a force applied to the tooth. How it is applied? By fixed appliance, by removable appliance, whatever. There is a force will be applied to the crown of the tooth. What will be happen if this force is able to make the tooth move? there will be a response occur in the tooth structure surrounded the tooth. This response, if you can see this picture, or if we return back to this picture, you can see here, magnet. This is the periodontal ligament fiber. You can see this is the left side of the tooth. It is normal in its size, normal in its position. And this is the right side of the tooth. Also, it is normal in its size and its shape and its position. While in the picture, after we applied a force, you can notice the change that happened in the left side of the tooth, in the periodontal ligament, and in the right side. What's happened and why it is occurred? Because of the force that will be applied to the tooth will be trying to move from the side of force application away from it to the other side. What will be happen in the periodontal or in the socket side? The periodontal ligament in the side of the tooth movement, it will be straight. It will be, compressed. And you can see here, this is the line, yellow line. You can see it is a compressed in its size. It is different from the previous one. It is normal in its size, normal in its shape, while here it is changed in its shape and reduced in its size. So it is compressed. So this side of the tooth, it is called a pressure side, or cause a compressed side. While on the other side, on the right side of the tooth, which is represented the side of force application, you can see also the fibers change in its size and shape. It becomes more thinner and longer, and it is different from the condition when there is no force application. This side is called a tension side because the fiber will become stretched and elongated in its size. So this side is called a tension side, and this side is called a pressure side. In the next lecture إن شاء الله بالمحاضرات الجاية رح ناخذ البيولوجيكال ريسبونس مالت التوث، ورح ناخذ الثيوري المسؤول عن إحداث التوث موفمنت. فأكو ثيوري عندنا اسمها البريشر تنشن ثيوري، هي هاي اللي دا أحكي أنا هسه عندها، البريشر tension theory that is response for induce the tooth movement. After this initial response that will be occurred, there will be a change also bone that appear in the pressure side and in the tension side. In the pressure side, there will be activation for the osteoclast cell that will be result in a bone removing or bone resorption. You can see these patches. This is represented a bone resorption. While in the tension side, there will be activation for the osteoblast cell, and there will be a bone apposition. So, as a summary for this, after this response have been occurred, the tooth will be changed from one position to another, and the tooth movement will be happened. Again, I will repeat, the tooth movement will be occur if the amount of force applied was enough to induce these changes and make the tooth response and change its position from one side to other. So as a summary, you can see here, this is the pressure, which is represented the force application in orthodontic appliance, fixed orthodontic appliance. So this side of the pressure or force application represented the tension side. On the tension side, the osteoblast cell will be activated and result in bone deposition. In the other side, toward it, the force direction or directed, there will be a activation of the osteoblast cell, and it will be induce a bone resorption in the pressure side. So this is the tension side and bone formation, and this is the pressure or compressed side that induce a bone resorption by osteoclasia. This procedure of bone apposition and bone resorption is called a bone remodeling. So this is summary and simply the idea about how the orthodontic tooth movement occur. We will take it in details in the next lecture, inshallah. Now, of course, I told you there is a types of orthodontic tooth movement. We have many types of orthodontic tooth movement. Before I talking about the types, I will enumerate for it's for you. There is a tipping movement, bodily movement, or it's called translation movement, rotation movement, root movement include torque and the uprighting movement, and there is intrusion and extrusion. So we have 6 types of orthodontic tooth movement. Each one have a characteristic feature for it, and each one have amount of force need to induce it. We will discuss later. But before I talking about the orthodontic tooth movement and its types, I should explain for you 2 important terms I needed to understand how the orthodontic tooth movement occurs. Firstly, the first term is the center of resistance, and the second term is the center of rotation. What I meaning by center of resistance? What I meaning by center of rotation? In the physics, the center of resistance, in physics, the center of resistance, it's mean the point on the body of mass of free body, points on the mass of free body, at which if the line of force that applied to this mass pass through this point, the body will be moved in a linear movement as a whole without any rotation. So this point is represented the center of resistance for this mass. While if the force will be applied in any other point of the body, not pass through this center point, it will be result in what? It will be result in rotation of the tooth of the space and not move it as a whole. And body mass. What about the tooth movement? Now, what I meaning by center of resistance? The center of resistance for the tooth, it is represented the point on the tooth around which the tooth will be moved. Where it is located for most of the teeth. For most of the teeth, it will be located either at the 1/3 or half the distance between the alveolar bony crest and the apices and the apex of the roots. السؤال هسه هنا، هل هاي النقطة راح تكون ثابتة center of resistance? If this position of the center of resistance will be fixed or it will be changed and vary from one tooth to other? As a general rule, it will be positioned at the distance between the alveolar crest and the apex of the tooth at the middle half, halfway, or a 1/3 about it. But it will be changed and vary depending on 3 important factors. These important factors include the level of alveolar bony crest of the alveolar bone, the length of the roots, and the number of the roots, and the morphology of the roots. So 3 important factors: the level of the alveolar bony crest, the number of the roots, and the length of the root will lead to change the position of the center of resistance. How? Like this condition. Here, in the first picture, on the right side, you can see here, this is the alveolar bony crest. It is normal. And this is the apex of the root, and it's also normal. There is no resorption or shortening in the length of the root. So normally, the center of resistance, its position, it will be located at the 1/3 or half the distance between the crest, alveolar bony crest, and the apex of the root. So this is the normal position of center of resistance. In the second case, you can see it change. It go more apically. Why? Because the alveolar bony crest, the level of it is change, and there is a bone resorption here. So, as I mentioned previous, the center of resistance should be between, located at 1/3 or half the distance between the level of crest and the apex of the root. So it will be change its position according to the level of crest and the apex of the root. In the third tooth here, you can see the alveolar bony crest is the same normal condition, while the roots the resorption, so there is a shortening in the length of the root, and depending on it, the center of resistance have been changed in its position. So these are the three important factors. For the number of the roots, in a single root, teeth with a single root, it will be located in one root, while when you have three teeth or three roots or two roots, it will be located between them in the forcation area represented, not on one root of them. Now, what I'm meaning by the center of rotation, the center of resistance represented the point present on the tooth around which the tooth will be moved. What I'm meaning by center of rotation, the center of rotation mean it is a point present on the tooth around which the tooth will be rotates around itself. So the most important thing for the center of rotation, we have a 4 position of it. Center of resistance, we have only 1 position. Okay, it's change تتغير حسب 3 فاكتور، بس هي مكانها ثابت بين الكريست وبين الابيكس مالت الروت، لكن السنتر اوف روتيشن لا، راح يكون عندنا 4 important position for it. According or depending on this position of center of rotation, we will have different amount or different type of orthodontic tooth movement. يعني البوزيشن اللي راح يكون للسنتر اوف روتيشن هو راح يحدد لي شنو نوع التوث موفمنت اللي راح تصير بالتوث. هسه راح نشوف شلون. The first position of center of rotation, it is located apical to the center of resistance. This is the center of resistance in red circle, and this is the white circle represented the center of rotation. It is located apically to the center of resistance, and it occurred when we applied a force on the incisal third of the tooth by a removable appliance. The results of the position of center of rotation apically to the center of resistance will be result in a type of a type of tooth movement called uncontrolled tipping movement. This uncontrolled tipping movement characterized, I will explain later, by crown movement in the force direction and movement of the root in the opposite direction. The second position of the center of rotation will be at the center of, at the apex of the roots, at the apex of the roots. This is the second position. One which will be happen when the force will be applied to the center of the crown of the root. How we can get this type of force? By using a fixed appliance. The result of the position of the center of rotation at the apex of the root, it will be give me a controlled tipping movement. The second type of tooth movement is controlled tipping movement. That characteristic by movement of the crown in the direction of the force application, and approximately the root apex will be fixed in its position. that we can get it by using a fixed appliance. The third position of the center of rotation will be located at the incisal edge or at the occlusal line of the posterior teeth. It can be located in there when we use a moment force applied for the root movement. This type of, or this position of center of rotation will give me a type of tooth movement called root movement, whether it was a torque or uprighting movement, characterized by movement of the roots in the force direction, and the crown will be stationary fixed in its position. The last and fourth position for the center of rotation will be at the infinity, at the center of resistance. يعني السنتر of rotation والسنتر of resistance يكونون اثنيناتهم بنفس الموقع. واحنا قلنا بالبداية إذا الفورس if the line of parts pass through the center of resistance راح يصير عندي والcenter of rotation هو وياه. It will give me a type of tooth movement. It's called a Budley or translation movement, characterized by movement of a whole tooth, root and the crown as a single unit in the same direction of force application. So شفنا هسه احنا شلون السنتر اوف روتيشن من تغير مكانه تغيرت تبعا الى انواع التوث موفمنت. هسه راح نيجي ناخذ شنو؟ التايبس اوف توث موفمنت اللي راح نحكي عليها. First type is called a tipping movement. A tipping movement, I can define it as a movement of the crown of the tooth in the direction of force application more than the movement of the roots. يعني أنا بالtipping movement يصير عندي movement بالكراون وmovement بالروت apex، لكن الكراون يتحرك عندي أكثر من الروت باتجاه الدايركشن مالت الفورس، والروت يتحرك بالopposite direction. عندي بالtipping movement two type of tipping movement. الأولى يصيحوا لها controlled tipping movement، والثانية يصيحوا لها uncontrolled tipping movement. شنو الفرق بين الاثنين؟ بالcontrolled tipping movement you can see here this is the circle, red circle represented the center of rotation. The center of rotation بالcontrolled tipping movement it will be located at the apex of the roots, and the force applied, and it's characterized by movement of the crown in the direction of force application, and approximately the root apex will be fixed in its position. While in the uncontrolled tipping movement, the center of rotation will be located apical to the what? To the center of resistance, and it will be result in what? Movement of the crown in the force direction and movement on the apex of the root in the opposite direction. The amount of force, as I mentioned previously, مثل ما قلت لكم مو أي فورس ممكن يسوي لي tooth movement. لازم عندي مقدار محدد من الفورس يكون able to induce the changes in the periodontal ligament and the surrounding structure of the tooth so that the tooth movement will be occur. So the amount of optimal force that I need to induce the tipping movement, whether it was controlled or uncontrolled, it will be equal to 35 grams for the anterior teeth and 60 grams for the posterior teeth. Here you can see the red arrow. It is represented the position of force application and the type of control tipping movement. Application of force in this point make the center of rotation located apically at the apex of the root and induce the tipping control tipping movement. Control tipping movement. This type of tipping movement, control tipping movement, can be achieved and obtained by a fixed appliance only. In the uncontrolled tipping movement, you can see that the line of force application is located at the incisal third of the crown, and this force application result in make the center of rotation located apical to the center of resistance and induce the uncontrolled tipping movement. And this type of force can be occur or I can get it by using a removable appliance or any other appliance that I can remove from the patient's mouth. I hope it's clear. Now, the other type of the orthodontic tooth movement is the bodily movement or translation movement. The translation movement, as I mentioned previously, is a movement of the whole tooth, the root and the crown, in the same direction of force application, at which the center of resistance and the center of rotation will be at the same position and the force will be passed through these points. The bodily movement, I need an amount of force that I needed to induce the bodily movement. It is equal to 70 grams for the anterior teeth and 120 grams for the posterior teeth. This type of bodily tooth movement, I can get it only by use a fixed appliance. Only by use a fixed appliance. So I can't get a bodily movement by a removable appliance. Only by fixed appliance I can get a bodily movement. The third type of orthodontic tooth movement is called a root movement. The root movement, as a definition, means movement of the root of the tooth in the direction of moment force application, while the crown will be stationary fixed in its position. The center of rotation, as I mentioned previously, for the root movement will be located at the incisal edge or on the occlusal line. The amount of force that I needed for induce it to root movement, it will be equal to 50 grams for the anterior teeth and 100 grams for the posterior teeth. Generally, we have two types of root movement according to the movement direction of movement of the root. If the root move in mesial or in distal direction, it will be called uprighting root movement. If the root move in labial or palatal direction, it will be called a torque movement. The other type of orthodontic tooth movement is called rotation. Simply, it can be defined as a rotation of the root around its long axis. The amount of force that I needed to induce the root movement is equal to 35 for the anterior teeth and 60 for the posterior teeth. The fifth and sixth type of orthodontic tooth movement is intrusion and extrusion. The intrusion, you can see here, it can be defined as a movement of the tooth in vertical direction toward apex, in apical direction. Move of the tooth vertically in apical direction. You can see here, this is the upper 6, this is the 5, this is the 7, and we apply, put it a 2 mini screw and apply elastic in order to induce intrusion for the 6. And here, after the intrusion, the 6 become, after the occlusion, in the same occlusal line and occlusal plane for the 5 and the 7. This is the intrusion. The extrusion, it is the same but the opposite. It is represented the vertical movement of the tooth away from the apex or in incisal direction. The intrusion, vertical movement in apical direction, while the extrusion, vertical movement in incisal direction. Like this case, we need to do extrusion for the upper central incisor and upper lateral incisor in vertical direction. The amount of force that I need for the intrusion, it is equal to 10 grams for the anterior teeth, 20 grams for the posterior teeth. While for the extrusion, I will need, like the tipping movement, I need 35 grams for the anterior and 60 grams for the posterior teeth. Now, why the intrusion have this low amount of force? not like the extrusion or tipping or badly. I give you this question, I need the answer from you at the end of the lecture. Why the amount of force that I need for intrusion is just equal to 10 or 20 grams, not like the other type. It's range from 35 to 60 or more. This question, I need the answer from you, thinking about it at the end of the lecture. Now, the important things now, finally, what I'm meaning by optimal force. This is the force I'm talking about. It's which differ from one type of tooth movement to other. What I'm meaning by it, it's mean the lightest force that will be move a tooth to its desired position in a shorter time without any heterogenic effects. So the important for us as orthodontic is this important things, make it and keep it in your mind. The important for us as orthodontists is to work smarter not harder. يعني أنا مو مشكلة أنا عندي إنه أنا أسلط قوة كلش عالية heavy force traumatic force تسوي لي deleterious effect على التوث اللي راح نشوفها إن شاء الله بالمحاضرات الجاية في سبيل أني أعجل بالعلاج مالتي وفترة العلاج إنه أسوي لها shortening time. لا، المهارة عند طبيب الأسنان أورثودونتس بصورة خاصة إنه أنا أشتغل smarter not harder. أنا آخذ light force خلي أريده بدون ما أذي الأسنان، حتى لو أخذ من عندي وقت بس هو راح ياخذ من عندك الديزاير بوزيشن الكافي اللي هو يستحق التوث بدون ما أني أذيه أو أسلط عليه أي شيء ثاني ممكن يأذيه بالتوث. ماشي؟ So this is the end of my lecture. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, if you have any question, إذا أحد عنده سؤال طلاب أو استفسار حتى أرجع له بالباوربوينت ونسوي.
السلام عليكم دكتورة.
ليش مجموعة ولا زحمة عليكم؟ مجموعة واحد لين ما ينزل لكم assignment يعني. عين. السنتر اوف ريزيستنس راح اشرح لكم مال الفيزيكس، اشرح مال التوث اللي تهمنا بالموضوع احنا. السنتر اوف ريزيستنس هي تمثل النقطة موجودة على الجسم مالتنا على التوث، إذا فاتت القوة من خلالها أو هي النقطة اللي على أساسها السن راح يتحرك. يعني القوة يعني الفورس ابلكيشن لها علاقة بالسنتر اوف ريزيستنس. إذا مرت القوة الفورس مالت اللاين مالتي بهاي النقطة السن راح يتحول كليته يتحرك بكامله، الروت والكراون سوية يعني بدلي موفمنت. إذا فاتت الفورس مالتها ابيكالي او انسايزالي إلها راح يصير عندي نوع من أنواع الروتيشن بالتوث، ما يصير بدلي موفمنت، يعني يتحرك عندي الكراون يتحرك عندي الروت على أساس هذا. بس ممكن هذا التحرك مالتنا يكون كنترولد، يعني مسيطرة أنا عليه، وممكن ان كنترول اعتمادا على نوع شنو، على نوع الابلاينس اللي انا استخدمته. استخدمت الفيكس لو استخدمت الريموفبل، الفيكس يعطيني الكنترول والريموفبل يعطيني فقط الان كنترول تيبنج. فهنا راح يتغير عندي لان البوزيشن مالت الفورس ابلكيشن راح يختلف بالفيكس عما هو وين بالريموفبل ابلاينس. فالسنتر اوف ريزيستنس هي تمثل لي النقطه اللي على اساسها لها ريليشن ويا اللاين مال فورس ابلكيشن، وعلى اساس التوث راح يتحرك. يختلف نوعيه التوث موفمنت من بدلي الى تيبينج الى روت موفمنت وهكذا. البوزيشن مالت السنتر اوف روتيشن بالنسبه للسنتر اوف ريزيستنس هم راح يحدد لي شنو؟ يحدد لي التايب مالت التوث موفمنت مثل ما عدت لكم اياها. المجموعه الاولى اكو بعد سؤال؟ واضحه هذه زينب؟ المجموعة الأولى أكو سؤال؟ center of rotation ممكن البوزيشن مالتها أول بوزيشن إلها يكون apical للcenter of resistance، وبالتالي راح أحصل على uncontrolled tipping movement، وأحصلها هذه وين؟ بالremovable appliance، أو ممكن تكون at the apex of the root البوزيشن الثاني، وراح أحصل عليها من controlled tipping movement وأحصلها بالfixed appliance. وممكن تكون لا، البوزيشن مالتها يكون السنتر اوف روتيشن يكون بالانسايزر ايدج وراح احصل على روت موفمنت. وممكن لا تكون البوزيشن مالت السنتر اوف روتيشن نفس المكان مالت السنتر اوف ريزيستنت، يعني اثنيناتهم قاعدين نفس المكان فيعطيني بوزيشن يصحوا له الانفينيتي. فراح احصل على شنو؟ مثل ما قلنا انه اللاين مالت الفورس اذا فات بالسنتر اوف ريزيستنت راح احصل بادلي موفمنت، الجسم كله يتحرك بالفضاء، فاذا راح احصل على بادلي موفمنت. هذا السنتر اوف روتيشن عندي الى 4 بوزيشنات، وهذا البوزيشن حددت لي نوعيه التوث موفمنت، شنو هو التايب مالته. اكو بعد سؤال؟ لا، روتيشن مو الروتيشن مو اكستروجن وانتروجن. الروتيشن مو اكستروجن، الاكستروجن واحد والانتروجن واحد والروتيشن واحد، كل وحده وحدها. الروتيشن موفمنت مع السن يدور داير ما داير روحه على اللونج اكسس مالته. الاكستروجن يطلع من مكانه، يطلع من السوكت فيرتيكال موفمنت، والانتروجن بالعكس يدخل ان. هسه انا سالتكم سؤال قبل ما ينزل لكم الاساينمنت، راح ينزل هسه. قلت لكم ليش الانتروجن فورس قليله مو مثل بقيه الانواع التوث موفمنت؟ من يعرف يجاوب؟ لا يلا جاوب. بس دقيقه هسه من بده يحكي وياي اول واحد قال لي اجاوب؟ لا عايد
دكتورة.
يلا عايد. شو يصير؟ لا انا سؤالي هسه على الانتروجن، ليش الانتروجن قليل؟ اي شنو يعني؟ واذا صار ريزوربشن؟ وين ينزل جو يعني؟ اي راح نسوي بيه انتروجن باتجاه السوكت، واذا صار ريزوربشن العاد هو عنده اسوي انتروجن لازم يصير ريزوربشن، هو مو توث موفمنت، عندنا ريزوربشن وعندنا اوبوزيشن. ها منو عنده جواب فكره ثانيه؟ عين.
دكتورة.
وقف لي زيد، وقف لي. من بدها تحكي يا بنيه هسه وياي؟
دكتور آيات.
ايات يلا احكي.
دكتورة، إنه لما عندنا انتروجن ونسلط قوة راح يسوي لنا تروما للتوث، لأنه البلاد سبلاي والنيرف يعني كلها راح تتأثر، فيعني يسوي لنا تروما للتوث.
تمام
فيعني
صحيح، عارفين
تسوي.
بشعر لانه يسوي لنا ديليتيريوس افكت مثل ما قلت لكم، ممكن يسوي لنا ياثر لنا على البلاد سبلاي، ممكن يسوي لنا روت ريزوربشن، فلذلك احنا نحتاج لو فورس حتى ما نسلطه اكثر من اللزوم، حتى ما يصير عندنا هذا الديليتيريوس افكت على التوث. يعني هو زميلكم عايد قال، يعني وصلت الفكره بس ما عرف يعبر عنها، قال يصير ريزوربشن بالبون، بس هو مو على البون، انا قصدي اهم شيء يهمني التوث حتى لا يصير عندنا ريزوربشن بالروتس. ما اعرف نزل عندكم هسه انتم الاساينمنت لو لا بعده؟ من بده يسوي وياي؟ من بده يحكي؟ ميس، ميس سمعتيني؟ يعني سمعتي الجواب مالت آيات؟ ثم يأثر على الروت ريزولوشن. ممكن نسوي إذا هيفي فورس بالانتروجن سوينا روت ريزولوشن، لذلك احنا سويناها لو فورس.
دكتورة بالنسبة للطلاب اللي يسجلون غير مجموعات احنا ما نسمعهم يعني بس المجموعة هم راح يسمعون الأسئلة ويسمعون الجواب شنو عليهم.
لذلك قلت امشي عليكم ورا الاسايمنت، قلت لكم امشي عليكم ترى نزل الاسايمنت طلاب هسه نزل عندكم الاسايمنت مال الكويز، روحوا تكوزوا، واللي عنده سؤال يرجع لي لمجموعته اشرح له ما عندي مشكله. والسؤال الكويز 5 دقائق فقط وراها ينطفل. ماشي؟